Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marie Herman, and I'm the owner of MRH Enterprises LLC. I'm so happy to be here today for Executive Support Magazine to host this week's Admin Chat. Our topic today, Mind Reading 101. You all know you're responsible for anticipating every need that your executive has, even when they don't even know that they have the need. We are expected to be on top of it. How do we do that? How do we anticipate things that they don't even know themselves that they need? Well, it's not 100% possible. But there are a lot of steps that you can take to improve your ability to anticipate what's coming and to be on top of things and to keep track of all those details. And we're going to take a look at some of those today. So, we're going to talk about how you can start on the right foot in this relationship with your executive, how to identify the boss's priorities, how to ultimately get ahead of the curve, how to think like your executive. And I'm also going to share a couple of cautions that you should take into account to make sure that you're not taking on too much, that you're being realistic about what you can anticipate and what you can't, and where you can end up kind of treading on people's toes if you're not too careful. So, what do I mean when I talk about starting on the right foot? Well, there's a number of things you can do. The first and easiest, maybe, is to choose the right boss in the first place. What the heck does that mean? Well, remember that when you are interviewing for a job, it's not only an opportunity for the company to interview you or for the individual in the case of a promotion to interview you, it's also a chance for you to interview that person, to get a sense of what kind of an executive that person is. Are they the kind of person that will micromanage? Are they the kind of person that will actually allow you to become a full partner with them? Are they the kind of person who needs to maintain tight control over every step of the procedure? Or will they actually let you exert some control where together the two of you can create a framework for a really successful partnership? So, choosing the right boss in the first place requires a lot of thought. It also requires self evaluation. You need to know who's the right boss for you because many times bosses can be considered difficult, but the truth is, they're not difficult. They just want things done the way they want them done. And so, if you can find a boss that wants things done the way you like to do things, that makes a much smoother relationship in the first place. So try to look for the things that you can do to head off trouble in the relationship before it even starts by choosing the right boss in the first place. Once you've chosen that boss, you need to establish the best method of communication. There's no point in being frustrated by the boss's working style or their communication preferences. You just need to adapt to what they are looking for. So maybe you have a boss who wants to have face-to-face conversations and you prefer to communicate by email. Maybe they prefer to hear things on the phone. Maybe they'd rather get a voicemail. Subtle adjustments on your part will make it easier for the boss, and that's going to make you look better. You should also read your manager's reactions to the way that you present information. So, for instance, if you have someone who loves numbers and doesn't have patience for the more abstract kind of thinking, then present your boss with a quantitative analysis first and then explain the impact. Notice if your boss prefers being asked questions or given answers, and then decide if you should cut to the chase or maybe soften up your opinion by asking, would you agree? So there's a number of techniques that you can incorporate into your own method of communication that can help make things easier. And I remember taking a neurolinguistic programming class one time that was absolutely fascinating. If you have the opportunity to learn about neurolinguistic programming, I encourage you to do that. And one of the things it talked about was how people will often give clues in their method of communication as to how they would prefer to communicate. So if you have a boss that tends to use expressions like, I see what you're saying there. That's a boss that's visually motivated. So they might prefer to see things in writing versus hearing things. Whereas if you have a boss who says things like, okay, I hear what you're saying, that's a boss that has audio leanings. They want to hear things. They would rather have a phone call than an email. They would rather be the face to face. If you have a boss that says something like, I just can't wrap my head around this, well, that's a tactile person. So the more you can do to demonstrate things, to show concrete physical objects, the easier it will be for them to understand what you're trying to convey. So if you kind of pay attention for those kinds of clues as well, that's one of the things that can help you to understand what's the best way of communicating with that particular executive. Look for those little opportunities to tweak how you communicate. When you see a boss getting impatient, are you perhaps taking too long to get to the point? Are you including too much information beyond what they are actually asking for? So look for ways to adjust the information that you're conveying to what they need. And maybe you do that with two different documents, one that has the key highlights and one that fleshes out the information. And in the same way, if you have a boss that's getting frustrated because they feel like they're pulling teeth trying to get you to give information, then prepare more information than you think is necessary so that your boss has all the answers at their fingertip. All of those will help you to better communicate with your boss, and that's going to help the relationship improve. And if all else fails, ask the boss, what is their preference? Would you rather I just gave you a summary and then separately had expanded information? So if you want additional questions answered, it's right there for you. Would you rather that I gave a verbal report once a week? Would you rather have a report by email? Would you rather have a report on paper? What's your preferred method of communication? It's critical in any relationship that you work on building trust. And that means that you are doing what you say that you will do, that you're communicating information to your executive so that they feel like things are in good hands with you. You want to feel like your boss trusts you, obviously. No one wants to work with an executive that doesn't trust them. But trust can take a while to develop, and it's not always an easy path, and it can be destroyed instantly. So, being true with your word, following through on anything that you promise to do, being completely transparent, all of these steps will help to build trust with your executive. Then, once you've built trust, you need to keep that trust by staying loyal. Now, this is something that can be a gray area for some individuals. You need to be loyal to yourself first, meaning you need to look at yourself in the mirror every single day for the rest of your life. So you need to make decisions that you are comfortable with and that you feel good about from an ethical perspective. You need to be loyal to your boss, but it may be more important to be loyal to your company. Ideally, that loyalty can work no matter what situation if you have an ethical boss and you have an ethical company. But it can be a challenge if one or the other takes some detours, so to speak. So, if in doubt, just remember where your loyalty lies and don't put yourself into a position of having to cover up something that could be unethical, of becoming a fall person for an unethical boss. You need to ensure that your boss is an ethical person, and then you need to maintain loyalty to them. So, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be loyal to someone? Does it mean that you do whatever they ask you to do no matter what, no questions? Not necessarily. Some bosses may think that, but really, that's not realistic in this day and age. Does it mean that you keep communications private, confidential? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. As executive assistants, we often have information that is extremely valuable and that is extremely confidential, whether it be salaries of employees or plans for layoffs or downsizings, terminations. We have information that could be damaging to the company, that could be damaging to our careers, to our bosses, and it is our responsibility and, in my opinion, our privilege to guard that information zealously. So that is one of the key ways that you will keep trust is by ensuring you're not doing things like participating in the office grapevine, beyond listening because you want to know what's going on, but not participating actively, not feeding that grapevine. Making sure that you are being positive and supportive of your boss and your company, recognizing that you may need to step back and see the bigger picture in trying circumstances, that things may not always be apparent to the employees why certain decisions are being made or certain actions are being taken, but you cannot speculate. You cannot. You cannot lose the trust of your executives by participating in those kinds of conversations. Things like speaking to the media as well. Only do that if you're authorized, only do that if you're giving information that has been approved for release. That's how you maintain trust with your employers. Establish the clear expectations. So, this is absolutely vital, especially when starting a new role. You have to work with that same person for 8 to 9 hours a day, maybe more, 5 days a week. And often the reason why relationships break down is because people make assumptions, or perhaps they haven't made an effort to sit down and have that all important conversation about what they both expect from each other. A good executive will take interest in your development and give you the necessary tools to help you advance your career. They'll enable you to become more efficient. A good assistant is going to understand the needs of the executive and aim to help them grow the business. You have to learn to trust and respect each other and value each other's opinions. And much of that comes with clear expectations. How will your boss feel if you question a decision that has been made? How will they react if you take responsibility and make a decision in your boss's absence? How much authority do you have for making certain decisions or implementing certain actions? Those expectations will prevent issues on the back end. Everybody should know up front when you are representing your boss versus yourself, what authority you have, what is the outcome that is expected, how will results be communicated, when and how will projects be assigned. All of that comes down to clear expectations up front. And if you have those clear expectations, then you will have a much better opportunity of developing those critical mind reading skills. One of the challenges that I recall from a past job was that I had an executive who changed his mind often. And because of that, it was very difficult for me to anticipate what he would want on any given day. One day, it could be as simple as he wanted bottled water. Another day, he wanted Coke. Another day, he wanted Diet Coke. Another day, he wanted some other beverage entirely. And that, in and of itself, is no big deal. Because what I would normally do with any executive of that nature is I would stock every drink they'd ever asked for. And all they would have to do is tell me what they were in the mood for that day. I would go and get that beverage and bring it to them. The challenge I had with this particular boss is that he had the expectation that I would know inherently, mind reading 101, what he wanted to drink that day. And yet he changed it often. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. If you drink the same thing every day, it is perfectly realistic to expect that I'm going to remember how you want it. For instance, how you want your coffee or your tea, how many lumps of sugar, how many, cream or whatever. But if you change your request every day to something new, then it's not realistic to expect that the person is going to be able to anticipate what it is you wanted that particular day. So, to be honest, I never got completely on the same page with that executive. And that was just a small example of something that would happen. But there are, of course, larger examples as well. And it's an inherent issue within the relationship that we were unable to come to clear expectations with each other. And even when we sat and discussed this, we never really fully resolved the expectations that we had for each other. And so the relationship never completely clicked. Would I do things differently now? I might have. I mean, I might have learned enough now that I would be even more forthright in my comments with him to ask, what do you want? What are your expectations? What is it that you need? But I also think that that's a challenge that you have to be prepared for, is that there are some executives that don't know what they need. They don't know what they want. And as a result of that, they cannot clearly communicate to you what they're expecting, what they want you to do, what actions they want you to take. That's a challenge that you may encounter. And it may be an indication that this is not a relationship that you should be in, that this is not an executive that you mesh with. It's always my desire to try to improve the relationship. I'm not one who normally would cut their losses and just say, let's move on to another job. I want to try and make the job work. And I think most of you are probably the same. If at all possible, you want to adapt and make the relationship work. But I think you also need to recognize that sometimes the relationship won't work because not all parties in it are invested in clear communication. What is your boss spending time on? Paying attention can tell you a lot about your supervisor's priorities and interests and concerns. So, notice what meetings are taking up the most time on their schedule, and then look at how you can help. Look at what people are discussing. Look at what kind of requests are being made of your boss. Pay attention to what's written on the whiteboard in their office. Kind of analyze email messages if you're copied on them. All of those interactions together can give you some clues as to what's going well, what's not going so well, and where you might be able to add some additional value in the way of assisting your boss. Now, obviously, you don't want to overstep by eavesdropping. You're not looking to spy on your boss, but it's merely being observational, that you are trying to learn things about the company, about the assignments that your boss is working on, and how you can best support your boss, about understanding what's going on in the company as a whole. And then you want to use that information that you have gathered from these observations to focus your efforts on streamlining the workloads. How can you provide additional assistance on the important projects? How can you free up your executive's time? How can you ensure that your boss remains focused? How can you help the company to save money? Or how can you help your boss to save time? How can you better use company resources? By paying attention to what your boss is spending time on, you'll be better able to identify some of those opportunities. And you'll be able to make suggestions that actually really add value to your boss and make you a better partner to your executive. Every employee should know their direct manager's goals and objectives and desired outcomes. If you're not clear on that, that's one of the things you should be asking about during a one-on-one meeting. Everything you do is directly tied to helping your boss, your department, and your company reach their goals. And the only way you can do that is if you know what those goals are. So your work has to tie into the success of the group as a whole. And so it also, I think, helps you to be able to see that you're part of something bigger. You're not a little cog in a giant machine. You are an integral part of the success of your boss and your company. And I think that's something that helps most of us enjoy our jobs better. We don't want to feel like we're just working away at our desk every day, doing something that doesn't really matter, that doesn't have an impact. We all want to feel like our work has value. And so being able to see that bigger picture of how we contribute to the goals, to the overall success of other individuals and to the company as a whole will help us to feel more satisfied with the work that we're currently doing. Try to show some initiative. Look around for opportunities of things that you can contribute. That could be stepping in where you see a need. That could be coming up with a new method of organizing things. That could be coming up with a process for workflow that makes things more efficient, that eliminates steps, that reduces the workload for other people, that improves the functioning of the office, that saves the company money, that makes the customer experience better. Really look at that big picture element of how you're having an impact upon the company. And that's an area where you'll be able to go back into a performance review later and demonstrate the initiative that you have shown. I suggested that we implement this software, or I suggested that we change this procedure, which ultimately saved us this amount of time, that saved us this amount of money, that improved this amount of workforce satisfaction, that improved the way we handle the resources of the company, the money, the conference rooms, the equipment rentals, the whatever. All of that together can be tremendously powerful in improving your relationship with your boss. Because when they see that you are actively trying to do things better, to learn, to grow, and to benefit them directly, they're going to be much more inclined to listen to your ideas and to allow you more leeway in implementing some of those ideas. If you find that your boss is not listening to your ideas or is not interested in you showing initiative, then that's something that you can sit and have a discussion about as well. But before you do that, really think through, how are you showing initiative? Sometimes there's a couple of ways that people can approach initiative. Some people jump in with both feet and they're giving suggestions and they're telling other people how to do their job, and they're essentially stepping on toes. Other people wait and observe first and then make suggestions. And I think in general, that's a better way to go. You don't want to make a suggestion for changes without fully understanding what system is currently in place and why it is in place. That, I think, is one of the things that most often frustrates other individuals when new employees come into the workplace and without fully understanding the why behind why things are done as they are, they start making suggestions for change. But because they don't have a complete big picture view, they're often suggesting things that are not realistic or that don't work with the circumstances of the company. So by spending time first understanding the why, looking at how are we doing things, why we choose to do things a certain way, what's the advantage and the benefit of doing it one way versus another, then we can actually come up with proposals that are well thought out, that explain the advantages of what we are proposing, that show how it's a better use of time and resources than our current system. That's the kind of initiative that they will be more inclined to embrace. And also taking the time to think about the obstacles to rolling out your initiative. So, for example, if you have people that are resistant to change within the organization, very often it's not that people are necessarily resistant to change, it's that they need to understand the benefits of a change before they're willing to make a change. And so, change for the sake of change is not something that appeals to a lot of people. Most people find change very disruptive. They find it very challenging to have to learn something new, to change around a whole system, to break habits that have been perhaps formed over years. And so you really need to be able to sell them on what the positives are of the initiative that you're putting out there. You can also show initiative where you are actively looking for ways to improve how your boss is doing things. And by that, I mean things like if they're preparing for a meeting, are you out there ensuring that they have all the information that they need, that they have all the background on those clients that they need, that they have their itinerary ready to go, that everything is in place so that it's seamless? There's no thought needed on the part of your executive because everything is put together with a nice, neat bow on it, so to speak. Your boss will appreciate those efforts. Might not seem like it sometimes, but they do. They do appreciate those efforts. If they feel like you are putting forth a good faith effort to reduce their workload, to streamline their work, they'll be much more inclined to be accepting of your overtures. And so that's an area where you can really learn, observe, watch the reaction of your boss, see what things are appreciated, see what things are not appreciated, and then try to get a better understanding of why things are not appreciated. If you feel like you're making suggestions and your boss is not accepting any of them, try to get a better understanding of why that is. Is it that you feel like I don't have a good understanding of the process? And so you're frustrated that I'm making these suggestions where I'm perhaps only seeing a part of the process instead of the whole thing. In which case, can I get more training so that I have a better understanding beginning to end of the workflow processes within the company? So then I can actually make good suggestions that make sense in the context of the role that I have. Is it that the boss feels like perhaps you're overstepping your boundaries, that you're giving suggestions for things like sales or marketing that actually have salespeople and marketing people who are professionals at their job who will feel like you are stepping into their roles inappropriately? That can cause friction within a company. And so that's another example of where we can be so enthusiastic, we can have the best of intentions, but we are unintentionally stepping on the toes of others that are already filling those responsibilities. So, there's a reason for the comment of stay in your lane, usually applied to driving, but it applies oftentimes in the workplace as well. Look first within your own role for initiative, for what suggestions you have, what improvements you want to make. Don't expand into other roles, other departments without first fully understanding what they do and why they do it. So you can see how it's so important to have that big picture understanding for initiative to be appreciated. Because otherwise, you're just kind of a bull in a china shop, making suggestions, throwing out ideas, but not really understanding the full ramifications of what you're suggesting. And that's why, especially, be careful not to just do changes without getting authorization first. Talk to people about your ideas before you implement them and get a sense of what will be the reaction if we do this. Will everyone appreciate it? Will they be on board with it, or will there be resistance? And if so, what is the reason behind their resistance? And how do we address their concerns so that we have a well thought out solution that we're proposing for any problems that we encounter? Be proactive. There is nothing worse than having an executive assistant who can't think on their feet and someone who has to be constantly told what to do or essentially be babysat. Are there busy seasons coming up? How can you help the manager prepare? Is your manager taking a vacation soon? How are things while they're gone? What are the ways you can help while they're out? How can you ensure that they have a good vacation? Look for those kinds of opportunities to be proactive, to be looking ahead, see what's coming down the pike. What can we do ahead of time? How can we minimize the last minute work and tasks? How can we um, how can we cut down on the likelihood of something going wrong at the last minute? All of that is being proactive. And so this is doing your job so efficiently and effectively that you don't encounter obstacles, that you don't have as many challenges. You're not constantly putting out fires. A big part of the mind reading is looking ahead and thinking logically about, well, what's the next step? What's likely to happen here? How can I avoid the problems? What are the kinds of problems we're likely to encounter? I was actually with my mother-in-law recently. I took her to get her car detailed, where got the beautiful cleaning inside and out. And afterwards, we stopped off and we picked up a couple of plants for her patio. And one of them was in a very small pot. And I watched as she put her jacket down and then she put the pot on top of it in her freshly cleaned out vehicle. And I said to her, we should probably move that to the floorboard of the back seat and put some stuff around it so it doesn't fall over. Oh, no, 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 she said. No, we don't need to do that. It won't fall over. It will be fine. It's a really short drive home. And it was only like a 10-minute drive home. Well, she drove home and proceeded to send me a message on Facebook saying, guess what fell over on the way home? And I laughed. I'm not going to lie. I laughed. And I really had to bite my tongue not to say, well, I told you so. It was something that seemed so obvious to me that anytime you take a corner, if you have something in your vehicle that is not well lodged, it's going to fall over. This was something that was clearly tippy. It was very easy to see the outcome, to see what was going to happen. And it happens every day on the job. We see things like what happens if the projector doesn't work? What happens if the caterer doesn't show up? We have plan Bs and sometimes plan C and D and E and F and G, depending on the task that we're doing. Having that ability to look ahead and see what is likely to go wrong here. It applies in so many different areas. For myself, I'm all about safety. I've worked in a number of environments where safety was a critical element, where it was the focus of investigations. It was, I worked with a forensic engineering firm that would investigate accidents and disasters that had occurred. I worked in a scientific lab that was all about safety. They had radioactive materials on site, and so they were extremely safety conscious, constantly did hazard analysis. And so it's very much a part of my own instinctive behavior to look and see what could possibly go wrong. And you can't plan for absolutely everything. There will be some things that, if there's an earthquake that day, there's a real limit to what I can do to prepare for an earthquake. There's things I can do, but there's a real limit to the number of things I could do. So you have to balance out being proactive about likely outcomes and what you can do to prevent or mitigate negative outcomes versus being so ridiculously proactive that you're getting buried in the minutia of possibilities. So there has to be a balance there. I can't wrap people up in bubble wrap. I have to, I can do simple things. I can do logical things of let's make sure we don't have trip hazards around, and let's make sure that the floor surfaces are not slippery. And let's make sure, we can do things like that. There are reasonable precautions of things that we can take, but we cannot wrap people in bubble wrap. So when you're looking for ways to be proactive, you need to balance out how do we mitigate the most likely things that are going to go wrong? How do we prevent them from happening? And what are the things that in the back of our mind we need to be aware of, but we need to also recognize we do or don't have control over those items? And so that's something that will, I think, help guide you when you're putting together your plans and thinking about how you can address issues. How do you find that balance between wanting to be prepared and not being so prepared that nothing ends up happening? Learn to ask the right questions. Too many people try to guess at what is important to their supervisors instead of actually sitting down and having a conversation with them. Maybe your boss will not be able to articulate exactly what you need to do, and maybe your boss doesn't know exactly what you need to do. But you can find some creative ways to get that information. So try to ask the right questions. What would be the right questions? Well, obviously, it depends on the situation. I'll have different questions for travel than I would for project management, than I would for a performance review, and so on. But some of the examples would be asking for what does success look like? If I'm being assigned goals in a performance review, how will I know that I have achieved those goals? What will you be measuring to determine success? That's the kind of question you should be asking before any project, before any performance review goal is agreed upon. How are we going to measure the success of the outcomes? And then you can ask yourself, once you've heard what the parameters are, is that objective or is that subjective? Is that going to be something where my boss says, well, I'll know it when I see it? No, I need something a little more concrete than that. What are you going to be evaluating? If you're looking at my ability to process expense reports, well, it's a subjective thing to say, do it faster. Or I want you to do it in a timely fashion. Well, what does that mean? But if it's objective, if you can say, I expect you to process expense reports within 48 hours of having all receipts. And so there's a time deadline, but it's something that can be identified. Did you receive all the receipts? Yes, you did. Did you have the expense report in within 48 hours? Yes, you did. Then we know that the goal was met. Be very careful about subjective goals, about things like, I think you should be nicer to the clients. What does that mean? How do I demonstrate that I'm being nicer to the clients? Well, is it going to be smiles? Is it going to be based on surveys from the customers? Is it going to be, based on some other observational behavior? You need to get something that can be measured objectively so that you both agree at the end of the year that yes, this was successful. Yes, improvement was made. Yes, quality standards were met, whatever those are. And so learning to ask those kinds of questions. As far as the mind reader side of it, asking your boss, what do you need from me in my role? What can I do to make your job effortless? What can I do to fully support you? How can I help you to achieve your goals? Those are the kinds of questions that you should be asking your boss. And if they don't know, how are they going to know when you're helping? So, really think through what are the ways that you can phrase your questions to help guide your boss to thinking through what they need from you. And I think that also helps in determining, here's what you're doing right, here's what you're doing wrong. Otherwise, we feel like we get this vague, not even guidance, because it's not guidance. We feel like our bosses are constantly criticizing us. They're never satisfied. And the problem is they're focused on what we're doing wrong, but they're not able to give us guidance on what they would consider the right way to do it. And so asking the right questions. I feel like you are dissatisfied with this element of the work I'm doing, and I would like to make sure that I'm meeting your standards. So can you please explain to me what would be what, again, it depends on what the individual situation is, but what would be what do you need me to do in order for you to consider this 5-star performance? I'd like to try and do things in the context of the performance reviews. And so I've worked at companies where they won't give out a 5-star. They'll do 1 through 4, and they will not give out a 5-star. And so in that situation, number one, I have a philosophical issue with that. But also, I like to ask them, give me an example of behavior that would be a 1-star level review. Give me an example of the behavior that would be a 2-star, a 3-star, a 4-star, a 5-star. What would it take to get to the 5-star level? And you'll find a lot of companies don't have an answer to that because they have no intention of ever giving out a 5-star rating, which is unethical as far as I am concerned. But asking the questions and having them clarify, here's what it would take to be rated 3-star. Here's what is considered meeting expectations. Here's what is considered exceeding expectations. Here's what is considered exceptional. Ask the questions and try to get it again in objective terms. Not just, well, I feel like this one works harder than that one. How are you seeing that? Is it based on output? Is it based on the number of hours that they're at their desk? Is it based on the fact that they show up 5 minutes before you do, so you don't know how long they've been there, but you're sure they're working longer hours than you are? Ask the right questions. Figure out what it is that they're looking for and what for them would constitute mind reading. What would constitute initiative? What would constitute being proactive versus what would constitute interfering or overstepping? Where is the line that divides those? Be aware of what your boss's boss wants. Remember that your boss is also trying to appease and anticipate the needs of their own manager. And so sometimes looking to those higher ups can give you some valuable insight into how you can better partner with your boss. I mean, you don't want to make your manager feel like they're going over their head, of course. But good senior leaders typically want to get to know the people that are working for them. They're trying to scope out some of the talent in the ranks. So look for opportunities to connect with your boss's boss and take advantage of that encounter to ask questions about how you can better support the whole team. If your boss's boss is emphasizing that this is the number one project of the company, this is the number one goal of the company, then translate that down into what portion of that your boss is responsible for and how you can help make sure that they meet that requirement so that they're hitting the number one goal of the company and you're providing them the support and the ability to do that. Master the tools. Master all the tools of your trade. One of the best ways that you can be perceived as a mind reader is using technology to your advantage. So putting in reminders ahead of time for yourself, putting in dashboards, for example, to be able to keep track of things and be aware of them before they go wrong. Part of the challenge of being a mind reader in the context of our jobs is that when we do our jobs flawlessly, it looks effortless. No one sees the work that goes into it. No one knows how much effort you put forth in making things go perfectly. Using the tools that are at your disposal, the computer software, the reminders, the alarms, the tools like Power Query, for example, in Excel, using the mail merges in Word, using the forms to gather information. All of these tools that are available to us can take a lot of the mundane details off our shoulders. So we don't have to rely on our memory to do everything. Instead, the software automation can help us. And a lot of people, a lot of administrative professionals are afraid for their jobs because of the artificial intelligence that is on the horizon, and some of which is here right now today. But the truth is, those are still just tools. And when you master those tools, they're going to make your career longer, not shorter. So keep aware of what's available out there to help you do your job more effectively, and always be open to learning more about them so that you can actually find ways to do your job better. Build your network. Make sure that you know the people that are out there who can help you, who have the answers that you need, who can give you guidance, who can provide mentoring. Look for that network. Build up that network. Make it really solid. And that way, if you're struggling with your relationship with your boss, if you feel like you're not on top of things, if you feel like you're not being as anticipatory as you could be, You can sound them out for ideas and suggestions for things you could be doing differently. And in some cases, you can get moral support from them and recognize that no, there's nothing more that you could have done. You did everything you could to be on top of that situation. Think like your executive. Put yourself in the shoes of your executive. Don't be afraid to speak up if you have ideas that would benefit the business or that could make your executive's life easier. Take some weight off their shoulders. Show interest. Make suggestions that could increase that business efficiency. We all have limiting beliefs, but the best way to overcome them is to be confident and to use your power when you feel like it's right. Understanding your executive's emotions and feelings is a critical thing. So show empathy to their words and try to generally become fully conversant with your organization and its business needs. When you think like an executive, that means that you step back from thinking about how things are going to impact you personally in your role. And instead, you think about how things are going to affect your company as a whole, your department as a whole. And that could include things like external factors, the global pandemic. Did you immediately leap to what it was going to have, what effect it would have on you as an individual? Or did you really step back and think like an executive? What are the things we need to do to be prepared as a company for what's happening? How do we roll with this? How do we get this rolled out? Big picture. The more you get exposed to the big picture, the better your solutions are, the better your ideas are. Because you're not just thinking about the impact on me, one individual, one person. Instead, you're thinking about the domino effect. When this happens, what's going to happen as a result? What's the next logical step? So, right now, thinking like an executive, you should be thinking ahead to what's on the other side of this pandemic. What does our work life look like? What will our relationships look like? How will our workplace be set up? Will we be a hybrid? Will we ever get completely back to the office? Are we going to maintain that remote component? How are we going to adjust our workflow and our processes under that new reality? You should already be thinking ahead on those kinds of thoughts. You don't want to wait until the time arrives to start identifying how you're going to transition into that new reality. That's part of thinking like an executive. Executives are often too busy to think ahead as much as they would like to. So, admins can help by systematically prompting their bosses, by providing reminders of key deadlines, things that they can do in advance. Hey, you have this meeting coming up. You're speaking next week. Is your PowerPoint presentation done? Have you thought through your script? They're often focused on today and putting out immediate fires. You can help them to also incorporate the future into their daily planning. So they're doing as much as they can to be ready when that time comes. Anticipate their needs. Do your research on whatever task or project it is that you're working on with this. Have them as prepared as possible. What are they actually going to need? Are they going to need directions? Are they going to need market research done? Are they going to need documents pulled, like business plans of clients and annual reports of clients? Are they going to need, are there going to be deadlines coming up that will impact the company, like new laws being implemented, for example, or other changes being made? Watch for places where they might not even know they're going to need something, but because you were looking ahead, you already anticipated, you already had the information ready, you already had the forms ready to fill out, you ordered the replacements for their supplies that you saw were getting low. You saw their dry erase markers were starting to get low. You had backup markers available. Those kinds of things. You see something that's going to need replacing, you take steps to replace it. You see something that's going to need to be researched, you take steps to research it so that you are ready before they even know they have the need, because you have been looking for what needs will be coming in the future. So try to become an aggregator where you are providing valuable insight when you find it. Handle the details. So critical as mind readers that we're taking care of the millions of details. That means that you, number one, have to know what the details are. So you have to actually have a comprehensive list of here's the tasks related to this project, here's when they're due, here's things we'll need in order to complete these tasks, here's the order they're going to have to happen in, all the traditional project management responsibilities. And then also incorporate that into our jobs of how are we going to convey to others? We're going to need information from them. We're going to have these deadlines coming up. Keep other people on track that you are responsible for. And all of this together is what makes us look like the Radar O'Reillys of our companies. For those that recognize the old MASH reference of Radar O'Reilly, who always had the information that was needed before it was even needed, had the form in his hand ready to be signed, always was ready. Become detail oriented. You need to be able to be big picture. You also need to balance that with being detail oriented and how everything fits together. All the parts come together to create one giant jigsaw puzzle. Handling the details is a part of our responsibilities, and it's critical in order for us to become mind readers. We have to know what the details are. And that may mean training our bosses to include us in these projects so that we know what's going on. How can I support you if I don't know what you're working on? I have to be kept in the loop. Overcome weaknesses. Use your strengths to offset your boss's weaknesses. You can become indispensable by learning what your manager's weaknesses are and then complementing them with your own strengths. So maybe your boss is kind of a brilliant visionary, but really disorganized. Well, instead of complaining about how difficult they are to work with, you can make up for what that boss lacks by taking on the role of organizer. Suggest deadlines, remind of appointments, follow up on things that may have been forgotten. Not only will you have gained your boss's trust, you'll also become a very valued member of the team. So really think through, what are the areas where my boss has these weaknesses, where this is not my boss's strength? How can I then step up and fill in the gaps to make things run more smoothly? Maybe it's people skills. Maybe your boss is a little abrupt with people. Maybe you can kind of act as a buffer for them. Really think through what that could be. Help your boss keep their promises. Ensure that if your boss is promising to do something, to have a document in on a certain date, to attend a meeting, to finish a certain task, help your boss keep those promises. It's another way that you are trying to make your boss shine. There are some particular challenges with virtual bosses, and some of those are that it's so easy to get out of the loop, to not be kept in communication with your boss, to have things missed because your boss forgot to copy you with an email or forgot to include you in a meeting. Maybe you don't have full access to their email, their calendar, or some of the other tools. And when you're in the office, you can just pop your head in and talk to them and, hey, what's on the schedule for today? You can be very casual. But when you're working remotely, those kinds of quick off the cuff conversations can really be a challenge. And so figure out a system, a process for overcoming those kinds of challenges, whether that is a once a day check-in on instant messenger with the same conversation you would have had in the office. Hey, what's on the docket for today? What's your priority for today? What's the key deadlines for today? Something like that, but where this is what your boss is working on. This is what needs to be done. I'm going to make sure that you stay on track and focused. Remember what your purpose is. You want to take pride in anticipating your boss's needs and business challenges, and you want to provide your boss with what they need without having to ask. So one of your key purposes is to look after and protect your boss. You want to make your boss look good. That's a part of our role. We want to make our bosses look good. And that comes in a variety of ways. That might be proofreading documents, that might be enhancing presentations, that might be helping them with communicating their messages clearly. But whatever your specific purpose is, make sure that that is driving all of your interactions with your boss. And make sure that your boss understands that. Sometimes it's a fine line between helping a boss to stay on track and a boss feeling micromanaged and nagged. And so you both have to be on the same page in that respect. You both need to be clear on here's why I'm doing this. I'm trying to help you. You need to be receptive to that. And what can we do to ensure that what I'm doing isn't annoying you, to be honest, to use a really frank conversation. That's an important part of the process of becoming better partners, is knowing where the lines are. Here's where it feels like you're being super productive and your initiative is helping me to stay focused. And then here's the line where when we cross over this, now I feel like you're really nagging me. You're getting on my nerves. I'm going to start avoiding your calls. So how do we figure out together where that line is so that we don't cross it, so that we stay in the territory of you're appreciative of my initiative? Have that conversation, identify that, and be clear with everyone. Put yourself on the calendar. You need to meet regularly with your boss to stay up to date on their tasks, their priorities, their needs. So, do you actually know what your boss's responsibilities are? Is your supervisor currently working on a project? Does your supervisor have an important upcoming meeting? If a problem comes up with a customer or shipping, is there any way that you can assist? Can you compile information or files? Can you do research? Can you make phone calls for your supervisor without being told what to do next or how to do it? Can you pull related files or contact information for files that your supervisor needs to begin a project? Can you free up time to work on a project for your supervisor? Are you careful to give complete information when you're leaving messages? Can you take on some of your supervisor's routine tasks? Do you organize documents and files in the way that your supervisor prefers? When you're completing tasks for the supervisor, do you take into consideration how they prefer the task to be done? Are your tasks current whenever you offer to assist the supervisor? Do you know your supervisor's work habits? Do you know their preferences and how they want to run daily operations? Can you communicate clearly with them? Are you flexible when it comes to helping them? Can you periodically review with your boss how you can help more? Are you loyal to your boss? These are all questions and conversations to have and to demonstrate. For calendar management, let's say that you are looking over your boss's calendar ahead of time. Well, look at things like the meetings. Are there any agendas that need to be prepared? Are there any speaking notes if your boss will be presenting? Has the room been booked? Have you confirmed all the things like catering? Is the PowerPoint preloaded on the machine? Have you organized transportation if your boss is traveling somewhere? Have you booked a venue in advance if necessary? Have you prepared agendas for all meetings? Have you organized any of the details associated with those meetings if you need to? Have you done confirmations with everyone for that week? So every week, as part of your calendar management strategy, you'll review what's coming up on the calendar. What are the things that require some action from your boss? How can you support your boss in those actions? What are the tasks that are required of you to be able to organize the meetings or ensure everybody is in the right place at the right time? All of those things happen on a regular basis. And the more that you can do in advance with your boss, understanding exactly how you are saving them time and effort and trouble, the better your boss will appreciate you, the better the likelihood. Clearly, you don't want to overstep. So think about the week and the things that make your boss overwhelmed. Figure out what you can help with, but also figure out what you cannot help with. You don't want to overstep your boundaries. You don't want to take on too much. You want to help them, but you don't want to be annoying in the process. So figure out when you need to just keep your head down and do your own work and not worry about the others versus when you need to step in and help your boss to be able to achieve their goals. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has given you some food for thought for how you can be a better mind reader with your executive. Again, my name is Marie Herman. I provide private tutoring for the Certified Administrative Professional exam. I also provide study groups for the Microsoft Office Specialist exam, for Google Workspace. I do advanced training for technology, professional development, career development topics. I'm so happy to be here today for Executive Support Magazine to launch this week's Admin Chat. Please come back every week, Thursday at noon Central Time, at 7 o'clock London time. And please do come back and visit. If you enjoyed this program, please leave a comment down below on the YouTube channel to let people know. Consider rating the video. And I hope that you'll be back regularly to check out Admin Chat on Executive Support Magazine. Thanks, everyone.